I manage a self-storage facility, and part of my job is auctioning off units when people stop paying. Cut the lock, roll the door, photograph the contents, list it. I've done it maybe 200 times. In June, Unit 214 went delinquent. 17 years of faithful auto-pay ending with an expired card, and I did my standard procedure, and my flashlight landed on a Marine Corps footlocker with a name stenciled on the lid. My father's name. My father, who died when I was 14, whose every possession, I have believed for 17 years, was destroyed in a flooded garage while I was away at basic training. The unit was rented 3 weeks before that flood, and the contact number on the 17-year-old rental agreement, the number I stood there reading in my own office, is my childhood home phone. I still know it by heart. Let me back up. I'm Priscilla, I'm 36, and I've worked the office at this storage facility for 9 years, manager for the last 5. It's a good job for a person like me. Everything has a gate code, a paper trail, a procedure. I came out of 6 years in the Army with a deep love of things being where the log says they are, and I got that from my father. So let me tell you about him first, because everybody else in this story spent 17 years trying to make him smaller, and this is my post. My dad was Tomas, Staff Sergeant, Marine Corps, 12 years in before I was born, and then a diesel mechanic after, which people who knew him said was the same job with worse coffee. He was a big, quiet, precise man who showed love through maintenance. He stenciled his name on everything, Kovac, T, in that spray paint milliponk. He collected vinyl, jazz, and Motown mostly, and wrote the date he bought each record on the inner sleeve in pencil. And he took pictures constantly, developed them at the drugstore, and my mother put them in albums. 16 years of albums, our whole family in her round, careful handwriting on the spines. He died in a highway accident 3 weeks after my 14th birthday. Some man ran a red light with a landscaping trailer, and that was that. I kept his last name my whole life, Kovac, even after everything I'm about to tell you, and you'll see why that detail earns its keep. My mother is Delia. She's 63 now. She grieved my father the way quiet women grieve, which is to say completely and almost invisibly, and 3 years later, when I was 17, she married Ned. Ned, how do I do this fairly? Ned was, on paper, fine. Steady job at a plumbing supply company, mowed straight lines, went to church. Ned never hit anyone, never screamed, never drank. What Ned did was manage the past, like it was a rival business. It started small, the way it always starts small. Within a month of moving in, the framed photo of my dad came off the hallway wall because, quote, "We look forward in this house, ladies." Said warm, said smiling, said while he was already holding the frame. Dad's albums migrated from the living room shelf to the garage, just to make room. When anyone said Kovac, my last name, my actual legal name, Ned would do this small mouth-tightening thing, and once, exactly once, he suggested to my mother that it might be healthier for the family unit if I took his name, and my mother, to her credit, said absolutely not, and Ned never asked again, out loud. I want that phrase in the record, never again out loud, because I've learned this year what Ned does with the things he stops saying out loud. And my mother let the small things go, everyone, because keeping the peace was the only house rule that mattered, and I don't say that to blame her. She'd buried a husband at 41. She was tired in a place casseroles don't reach. When the photo came off the wall, she moved it to her nightstand drawer. When the albums went to the garage, she said at least they're together. She managed her grief the way you manage a fire in a building you can't leave, quietly, in a drawer. Remember the drawer. Now, the flood. I need to walk you through this carefully, because for 17 years this was just a sad thing that happened to my family, and now it's the crime scene. I was 19, and I'd just left for basic training, first time away from home in my life. 5 weeks in, my mother went into the hospital for a hysterectomy, planned surgery. She was fine, but she was in for 4 days and recovering for 6 weeks. And during that exact window, with me at Fort Jackson and my mother on a hospital bed, a pipe burst in the garage. That's the story. Burst pipe, standing water for 2 days before anyone noticed, everything ruined. And Ned, hero of the hour, handled all of it himself, so my recovering mother wouldn't have to lift a finger or see the damage, rented the dumpster. did the hauling. By the time my mother came home, the garage was empty, bleached, and repainted. And by the time I came home on leave 4 months later, there was a workbench where my father used to be. Everything. The footlocker with his uniforms, the vinyl, 200-some records with dates penciled in his hand, and the albums, Reddit, 16 years of photo albums in my mother's round handwriting. Every picture of my father that wasn't in someone else's house was in that garage, and Ned stood in my parents' kitchen with his hand on my shoulder and said, "I'm so sorry, kiddo. It was unsalvageable. I didn't want your mother to see it like that." My mother cried for a month, quietly, in the drawer way. I called from base twice a week and listened to her pretend she was fine. I grieved my father a second time, standing at a payphone in South Carolina, and the man who ran the cleanup mailed me cookies that week. I want you to hold both of those facts at once, because I've had to. One more thing from the years since, and then the present. About 2 years after the flood, the nightstand photo vanished. The last picture, the one my mother had rescued from the hallway into her drawer. She mentioned it to me once, baffled, hurt. I must have moved it somewhere. I tear the room apart and I can't find it, and she blamed herself, and Ned helped her look. Helped her look, Reddit, for an afternoon. File that away with the drawer. 17 years pass. I do my 6 years, come home, end up running a storage facility, which my therapist finds very on the nose and I find very comfortable. I see my mother weekly and Ned at holidays, and we are civil the way weather systems are civil. And in April of this year, Ned, 68 now, had a stroke. A real one. He survived, thank God, I mean that. But his right side is weak, his speech comes and goes, and he's been home recovering since May, with my mother caretaking and his grown daughter Tammy orbiting the house like a defensive satellite. And here is the domino nobody saw, because nobody could have. Ned handled all the money. All of it. Always. His office, his file cabinet, his passwords. My mother has not paid a household bill in 19 years of marriage. That was the deal. The man handles it. So when the man's brain clotted in April, a whole invisible lattice of automatic payments started quietly dying as cards expired and renewals lapsed. My mother and I spent May sorting his mail into piles, insurance, utilities, mystery. There was no mail about a storage unit. Of course there wasn't. It was autopay, on his personal card, and had been for 17 years, and the statements went to an email address none of us knew existed. June 9th, a Monday. My work queue kicks up the delinquencies, standard, and Unit 214 crosses the 90-day threshold. Tenant name, E. Callahan. Didn't ring any bell. Original rental date, September of 2008. Long-term tenant, expired card, no response to notices, which happens with older renters. They pass away, families don't know the unit exists. I processed the paperwork for lien procedure like I've done 200 times, and that's when I got to the contact number on the original agreement, typed by whoever sat at this desk 17 years before me, and my hands went cold on the keyboard. 555-0477, my childhood landline, the kitchen phone with the long cord, a number I could dial in a coma. I sat with that for a day, telling myself there were innocent explanations, and I could not construct one. And Wednesday morning, per procedure, I took the bolt cutters and Gus, our maintenance guy, who's been on this yard longer than me and has watched me open 200 strangers' units, and we walked down row 2 to unit 214, and Gus cut the disc lock, and I rolled the door up, and I raised my flashlight. Kovac, stenciled military letters on an olive footlocker, dead center, like it had been placed to be found. Behind it, boxes. Boxes labeled in round, careful, 17 years younger handwriting I'd know anywhere. Albums, 1989 to 1995. Albums, 1996 to 2002. Bedroom. And on the left, a wooden crate of vinyl, 200-some spines, and I didn't have to pull a single record to know that every inner sleeve had a date penciled on it in my father's hand. September of 2008. The flood was the first week of October, 2008. This unit was rented 3 weeks before the pipe burst. There was no flood, Reddit. There was a rental agreement, a hand truck, and then a pipe. My stepfather moved my dead father into storage, staged the destruction, comforted the widow, mailed me cookies, and then paid $89 a month, every month, for 17 years, to keep a dead man out of his house. Roughly $18,000. To warehouse a rival who'd been in the ground since I was 14. Gus looked at the stencil and looked at me, because Gus knows my last name. It's on my office door. He took his hat off. He said, "Priscilla, tell me what you want done and it's done, and I was never here if you need that instead." Here's what I did, and it's the part of this story where my boring, procedural little job turns out to be the sword in the stone. I did everything by the book. I photographed the unit for the file, every box, every angle, time-stamped. I noted the delinquency, the lien status, the failed contact, and then I exercised a manager's discretion that exists in our policy for exactly no situation like this, pulled Unit 214 from the auction list, settled the outstanding balance, and secured it under a new lock. My lock. Because here is the beautiful, terrible, quiet fact at the center of everything that happens next. Under our state's lien law and our own rental agreement, a unit in default, with a dead-end tenant identity and 17 years of contents, was now, legally and procedurally, under the facility's control. And the facility, on weekdays, is me. I did not open the footlocker that day. I stood in that unit for a long time with my flashlight off, in the dark, with my whole childhood stacked in cardboard around me, and then I rolled the door down and drove home. The footlocker comes later, and I need you to be sitting down for it, same as I should have been, but I'm getting ahead of myself. A lot of you are going to ask why I didn't drive straight to my mother's house that Wednesday with a box of albums in my back seat, and the answer is that I've processed 200 delinquent units, and I know what happens to claims that arrive before their paperwork. I had a stenciled footlocker and a phone number. I did not yet have Ned on paper, and this was going to be done on paper, because paper was the only language that man ever respected. E. Callahan. That was the tenant name, and it took me 4 days to close the loop. I searched it every way my job has taught me, and the thread that finally pulled was an obituary. Ned's mother, who died in 2011, and whose maiden name, printed right there in the funeral home's archive, was Callahan, Eleanor Callahan. My stepfather rented the unit under his dead mother's name. I sat in my office and laughed at that. Actually laughed, one ugly bark, because think about the mind, read it. The man erasing my dead father from our house used his own dead mother as the eraser. Nobody in this story gets to rest. The card was the second confirmation. Our system keeps the last 4 digits and the expiration of the autopay card, and the expiration date matched the timeline exactly. The card died in February. The grace period burned through spring. 90 days, landed in June. February is when my mother says Ned's bank mailed him a replacement card that sat unactivated on his desk, because in February, Ned's hands still worked, and his passwords still lived in his head, and by April neither was true. 17 years of perfect concealment, ended by a plastic expiration date and a blood clot. He built a vault, and the thing that cracked it was his own body forgetting to pay the light bill on the crypt. And then I did something I'm not fully proud of, and I'll take my lumps in the comments. I tested him. I went to Sunday dinner at my mother's, first one since the discovery, and I sat across from Ned, post-stroke Ned, thinner, slower, his right hand curled in his lap, Tammy cutting his chicken, and during a lull I said, "Light as anything? Work's been wild. Auction season. We just processed this unit from 2008, 17 years of autopay, and then poof, card expired. And I watched him. I watched it move through him. The fork stopped. The good hand flattened slow on the tablecloth like a man steadying himself on a boat. His eyes came up to me, and read it. The stroke has taken a lot from Ned, but it has not taken whatever looked at me across that chicken, and what looked at me knew, and what looked at me was doing math about what I knew. Neither of us said one word more about it. Tammy asked if anyone wanted more beans. I need to tell you about the moment that ended my patience, because it wasn't Ned, it was my mother, the following Tuesday. We were doing his mail piles again at her kitchen table, and she got quiet, and then she said, out of nowhere, the way grief comes out of nowhere, "You know what I thought about last night? Your father's albums. Our wedding one had this terrible cake picture, frosting everywhere, and I can't, Priscilla. I've been trying all week, and I cannot remember your dad's face in it anymore. Just the frosting. I wish I still had even one album. One. And then she patted my hand, hers to comfort me, and got up to check on the man in the back bedroom who had her wedding album in a cardboard box, 11 minutes from her kitchen, labeled in her own handwriting, under an $89 a month lock. I drove to the facility that night at 9 p.m. and sat in my truck outside row 2 for an hour. And that Saturday, alone, with the yard closed and the gate shut, I rolled up the door of Unit 214, set up a work light, and opened my father's footlocker. Okay, this is the part I've rewritten 4 times, and I'm going to take it in the order it happened, because the order is the story. The top layer of the footlocker was uniforms. Dress blues in a garment bag, folded the way only the military folds things, and his cover, and a cigar box of ribbons and rank insignia, and I sat on a milk crate in a storage unit, and held my father's dress blues to my face like a person in a movie, and they smelled like cedar and 17 years, and that part of the day is mine, so we'll move on. Under the uniform tray, the layer I expected. Paper. His discharge papers, birth certificate, our old passports. The nightstand photo, Reddit. The one that vanished 2 years after the flood, the one my mother tore her bedroom apart hunting while Ned helped her look. It was there, still in its frame, face down, in a box labeled bedroom in handwriting that was not my mother's round hand, but small and square, and I want you to sit with what that box means the way I had to. The unit was rented in 2008. The photo vanished around 2010. This was never one crime, one terrible month, one panicked purge. Ned made deposits. For years. Anytime a piece of my father surfaced in that house, it didn't get thrown away, it got transferred here, filed, warehoused, like the man was running a branch office of his own jealousy. The unit had layers, like sediment. You could core sample my stepfather's marriage in there. And then, at the bottom, under a wool blanket, I found the reason. The actual reason, the thing that reframes every single beat of this story, and I've thought hard about how to give it to you. 2 bundles of letters, tied with kitchen string. The first bundle I understood immediately. My father's letters to my mother, from his deployments before I was born, worn soft at the folds from being read. Fine. Precious, but expected. A wife keeps those, they'd have been in the garage with everything else. The second bundle stopped my heart, because the second bundle was my mother's handwriting, and the envelopes had no stamps and no addresses, just a name, Tomas. And the letters inside were dated 2007 and 2008. Read it. My father died in 2003. My mother wrote these letters 4 and 5 years after we buried him, 2 years into her marriage to Ned. She was writing to her dead husband, at night, I assume, in the drawer way, the fire in a building you can't leave way, and she was hiding them somewhere she thought was hers, and Ned found them. I read 3. I'm going to share 2 lines and keep the rest. And if that's bad content, I don't care. In one, from the fall of 2007, she wrote, "The school pictures came today, and Priscilla has your chin now. It's getting stronger every year, and I almost put one in an envelope for you before I remembered. I do that less than I used to. I'm sorry that I do it less." And in the last one, dated 3 weeks before the unit was rented, September of 2008, she wrote, "N found the box I keep in the sewing bench. He didn't say he found it, but it had been moved, and he's been so kind all week. And Tomas, his kindness has edges. I should stop writing these. This is the last one, I think. Be somewhere good. He didn't say he found it. His kindness has edges. 3 weeks before Unit 214 was rented. 4 weeks before the pipe. So here is the reframe, the whole thing, and I had to sit on a concrete floor under a work light to hold it. The flood was never about decluttering a rival's boxes. Ned found out that 2 years into his marriage, his wife was still writing letters to her first husband, and he could not confront her, because confronting her meant admitting he'd searched her sewing bench, and worse, it meant hearing her say something he could not survive hearing. So he did what managers of the past do. He confiscated the correspondence. All of it, both directions, hers to Tomas and Tomas's to her. And then he took everything else the letters could have lived near, the albums, the records, the footlocker, the entire physical evidence that her first life had happened, and he staged a burst pipe, and he let his wife mop the aftermath. She told me that detail this month, and I will never unhear it. He let her mop the garage where her wedding album no longer was. And then he paid $89 a month for 17 years, not to store my father, to store her grief. To hold it hostage, where she could never touch it, and never bury it, and never, ever finish it. My mother has spent 17 years unable to remember my father's face in the frosting picture. And the frosting picture was 11 minutes away the whole time, and the man who took it drove past this facility to buy plumbing supplies. I locked the unit and sat in my truck, and I made the decision I want the comments to weigh, because it's the one I'll answer for. I did not go to Ned. I did not gather the family for a grand reveal, and God knows I've fantasized the version where I wheel that footlocker into Sunday dinner. Ned was not the wronged party in that unit, and neither, technically, was I. Those were her albums, her letters, her 17 stolen years of mourning. The person who got to decide what happened next was the person everything was stolen from, and for once in this whole story, somebody was going to hand my mother the truth instead of a cleaned-up garage. Gus came in on his day off. We loaded the footlocker and 4 boxes into the facility van, and Gus, who has said maybe 40 sentences to me in 9 years, said one more on the loading dock. He said, "My old man ran my house like that. You're doing the right order of operations." And we drove to my mother's house on a Tuesday morning, while Ned recovered in the back bedroom, and I wheeled my father up the ramp we'd installed for the man who hid him. It's been about 10 weeks since that Tuesday morning, and people keep asking me what the confrontation was like, and the true answer is that I wasn't in the room for the only one that mattered. Here's how it all landed. My mother opened her front door and saw me on the porch with Gus and a hand truck, and a footlocker with Kovac, T stenciled on the lid, and read it. I had planned words. I had rehearsed in the van. I never got to use one of them, because my mother looked at that stencil for about 4 seconds, and her hand came up over her mouth, and she said, through her fingers, one word: where. Not what, not how, where. Like part of her had been waiting 17 years for a location. We set it up in the living room. I told it in order. The same order I've told you: the delinquency, the phone number, the rental date 3 weeks before the flood. E. Callahan, the card that died with his stroke. My mother sat on her couch with her knees together like a woman at a funeral and listened to the whole audit without one interruption. And when I said there was no flood, Mom, she nodded slowly and said the sentence that broke me worse than anything in the unit. She said, "I mopped that garage, Priscilla. When I got home from the hospital, there was still water in the corner by the dryer, and I mopped it, and he watched me mop it, and he said, 'Honey, leave it. You'll wear yourself out.' He staged the puddle," read it. The man staged a puddle for his recovering wife to find, set dressing, and then performed mercy about the mop. Then I opened the footlocker and gave her the albums, and I left the room while she met my father's face again, because some things you don't watch, you guard the door for. And then the letters. I put both bundles on the coffee table, hers and his, kitchen string and all, and I told her where they'd been in the stack, at the bottom, under the blanket, and I watched my 3-year-old mother recognize her own handwriting on envelopes addressed to a dead man, letters she had believed for 17 years she had lost, or thrown out in some fog of grief, or her actual theory that she'd wanted to lose, that some healthy part of her had disposed of them and she should be grateful. 17 years of gaslighting herself on his behalf. That's the efficiency of what Ned built. He only had to lie once, and she staffed the lie for free forever after. She untied the string. She read the top one, the last one. This is the last one, I think. Be somewhere good. And my mother, who grieves in drawers, made a sound I had never heard from her in 36 years. One single cracked open sound, and then she gathered them up, all of them, held them against her chest like a baby, stood, and looked down the hall toward the back bedroom. She said, "Stay here, sweetheart," and she walked down the hallway with her letters, and she closed the door. 25 minutes. I sat in that living room with Gus's hand truck and my father's dress blues for 25 minutes, hearing only the low, level tone of my mother's voice through a wall, never his, and I will go to my grave not knowing most of what was said, and I've decided that's right. It was theirs. The marriage got its trial in that bedroom, both parties present, and the woman he'd managed for 19 years did not need me to hold her purse. When she came out, she was calm in a way I'd never seen, calm like after weather. She said, Ned is going to finish his recovery at Tammy's. Tammy can look forward with him. And then she picked up her phone and called Tammy herself and told her to come get her father. And when Tammy started up, my mother said, "I'm not asking you to believe me, honey. I'm telling you what's in my living room. Come look at the stencil." Tammy came. Tammy looked. Tammy, to her credit, which costs me something to type, went white and packed her father's medications without another word about ancient history. Ned said one thing to me on his way out. His speech comes and goes, so he said it slow, leaning on his daughter, and I want it in the record because it's the most honest he's ever been, and because it proves the stroke didn't touch the part of him that mattered. He stopped at the door, looked at the footlocker, then at me, and said, 17 years. Most men would have burned it all. I kept every piece safe. I kept every piece safe. He's still saying a version of it from Tammy's guest room, I hear. In his accounting, he's the story's careful steward, the man who spent $18,000 preserving what a lesser rival would have destroyed, and I've stopped expecting the math to ever come out different in his head. Some ledgers only balance from the inside. My mother filed for legal separation in August. Delia is 63, he's 68, and recovering, and she has taken exactly zero satisfaction in the timing, and told the one church friend who dared cluck about abandoning a sick husband, I nursed him all spring. He warehoused me for 17 years. We can compare invoices whenever she's ready. My mother has been producing sentences like that all summer. It turns out there was a whole woman in the drawer. The albums live on her coffee table now, all of them, and the wedding one stays on top, open to the frosting picture, my father laughing with cake on his chin, and my mother told me she looks at it every morning with her coffee, quote, reloading him. And if you need me to explain that phrase, you've never lost anyone. The vinyl is at my place. And on Sundays I play his records and check the penciled dates, and I'm building the collection a proper shelf. Unit 214 sits empty. I close the file myself, contents claimed by owner, and every time I walk row 2 I touch the door once, which Gus has seen me do and never once mentioned, because Gus is the best man in this story, who isn't stenciled on a lid. And Memorial Day weekend, my mother asked me to drive her to the cemetery. She brought the letters, both bundles. I thought she meant to bury them there, or burn them, some ceremony. She didn't. She sat on the grass at my father's headstone for an hour while I waited by the truck, and when she came back, she had all the letters still with her, plus one more, new envelope, sealed, and she tucked the whole stack into her purse and said, first one in 17 years. I owed him a reply to some things. She writes to him again now, when she needs to, openly, on the coffee table. Nobody manages it. So that's my whole story, and here's what I need the comments to fight about. Honestly, was I right to give the decision to my mother, instead of confronting Ned myself, or did I hand a 19-year victim the heaviest box in the unit? Does a man recovering from a stroke deserve any grace on the timing of his reckoning, or did he spend 17 years pre-forfeiting it at $89 a month? And the one I keep turning over on Sunday nights with my father's records playing. Ned never destroyed a single thing. He preserved all of it, perfectly, climate-controlled, for 17 years, and he calls that keeping it safe. Is there any world, any version, any angle, where that's even 1% love? Or is a locked unit just a slower fire? What would you have done with the letters?